Greetings, new or regular listeners. Thank you for tuning in to the program. My name is Henrik Palmgren and this is Red Ice Creations Radio. We are recording from Sweden in Scandinavia, and you can find us worldwide at redicecreations.com. News, radio archives, films, links and resources. And we've got an excellent program for you lined up, so let's tune in. Today we are joined by filmmaker and researcher David Sereda. Some of you might be familiar with some of the films that he's behind, like Evidence, the Case for NASA UFOs, From Here to Andromeda, and his latest one is called The Voice. There's a few different websites that you can take a look at during our program here today. voiceentertainment.net, From Here to Andromeda.com, and there's also waterthemovie.com. David also has a blog that you can find at davidsereda.blogspot.com. So I'm looking forward to talking more about some of David's film work and research here today. So it's a pleasure to have you on the program, David Sereda. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks, Henrik, for having me on and to be in Sweden. And to talk a little bit to Europe will be fun.
Excellent. Thank you again for coming on. You know, I thought we could begin today to talk, if you will, a little bit about your background for listeners that might not be familiar with your films or your research. And I must say that you seem very well versed in many different scientific fields, but also in various spiritual teachings. Do you have a background in any of these fields, David?
Well, my background is in the arts and the ecology. I actually started studying photography, and I won a lot of awards in photography in school, and then I became a tree planter in the mountains of British Columbia in Canada. I'm Canadian by birth, and I planted trees, for about 22 years. I planted trees in the forests of British Columbia all the way up into the Alaskan Panhandle, and in the off-season, which is about 6 months of the year, I was making films and writing books and researching and practicing meditation every single day now for over 30 years. Mm. I'm 46 years old. And, when you meditate every single day for 30 years, you're bound to have some very profound experiences. And some of the periods of my life, I was meditating 3 to 4 hours every single day for many, many years. Mm. And now that I'm very busy, I sit, maybe an hour per day in sitting practice. And I've done a lot of different therapies, and I've studied with a lot of different masters from the Far East, just dozens of them. And I've traveled to India, taken the Dalai Lama's course, 7-day course, and I've studied with different teachers in India. So I've been exploring consciousness, studying world religions and the space sciences. I'm very well known for my research into UFOs and the UFO interstellar phenomenon. And my first film was called Evidence, the Case for NASA UFOs, which was a really low-budget film I did with my friend John Johnston, and we made it for just about $3,000, and it's gotten, over 1 million downloads on Google and YouTube before I took it off.
Yeah. Wow.
And, it became kind of a cult hit film, and what I wanted to do with it is just make $1 downloads, and, it's insane what's going on with Google and YouTube. Nobody pays for the content.
Sure.
But in order for me to continue on as a filmmaker, I have to charge even a nominal fee for some of these films per view.
Right.
And I just haven't been able to set that up yet. But my new film, The Voice, explores... I'm approaching the problem, are we alone in the universe, from a different perspective. I'm looking at the physics and the research that's being done into consciousness and the conscious universe. Mm-hmm. And once you can identify how the conscious universe works, the idea of contacting extraterrestrials or life beyond Earth gets a little more exciting than just sending radio waves around like we're doing now and searching for a signal. I mean, just recently, the Beatles song Across the Universe, inspired by John Lennon, was inspired by his visit to India, studying under Maharishi Mahesh Yogi. Mm-hmm. The song gets broadcast, I think it was on February 4th at 7 p.m., New York time. And the Maharishi dies within, less than 12 hours. He died. Mm. And I thought that was pretty amazing. I mean, it's like this beautiful song about, a guru, the guru of Maharishi, is being broadcast across the universe to the North Star, and he dies just in time to, catch the wave.
Exactly,
when you think of music going all the way out into the universe like that, I mean, Pythagoras, the great Greek mathematician and the father of modern music and classical music, experienced going beyond the physical body's boundaries in a very purified state of consciousness and hearing the music of all the 9 planets. And he coined the term the music of the spheres.
Right.
He invents the monochord, and then he actually develops the intervallic system that leads to modern, classical and modern music. Well, I started having experiences like that, and I didn't know any history or anything about it. My father, took me to, he led a Buddhist meditation retreat in our house in British Columbia and Vancouver in the early 1980s, and I was about 17, 18 years old at the time. And after sitting in meditation pose for 12 hours a day, which is, I've done extreme skiing, skydiving, tree planting, riding my racing bike 35 miles a day up and down mountains. And the hardest thing you can possibly do is sit still all day and holding a posture, not just sitting in a chair,
right,
but holding this cross-legged posture. And every hour you get up, you stretch your legs, and then you sit again. And facing the opaqueness and the boredom of the mind is excruciatingly difficult. But finally, on the second day, I just had this explosion of ecstasy that started in my belly center, and I just started laughing, and I had to excuse myself from the room, and I went into this cosmic state of mind where I was walking in my body, but I wasn't the body. I felt like I was this giant field. And the field, I could feel when the wind blew through the trees, it was like it was blowing through me. And I would laugh because I would say, oh my God, the wind is touching me, but it's the tree. And when the birds walked on the grass, they were walking on me. And there was this ecstasy bathing everything in nature. I looked up at the sun and I heard this sound. I heard the sound of the sun. It was a really deep, low hum combined with a very high frequency ringing sound. And I stood there looking at the sun going, oh my God, I'm really hearing this thing. I'm really hearing the sun. And for years my friends would laugh and say how crazy I was, but the sun isn't making any noise. And, over 20 years later, NASA has now recorded the sound of the sun, which we have this whole section in the film The Voice, this 3-hour high-definition documentary on consciousness. And you can actually hear the sound of the sun and experience it. And it's exactly as Pythagoras had described it in the 6th century BC, that the high and the low sound combined. So the film, The Voice, explores everything from the auras of subatomic particles, the auras of atoms, to the auras of humans and plant consciousness researchers, all the way to the Global Consciousness Project at Princeton University, where we see the aura of the planet itself being measured in the lab, and all the way to what are known as the 9 greater rings of enlightenment, which have different labels and names in different religions, but they are all extant in most of the major religions of the world. And the idea is that, for example, nirvana, and it's a very common term. A lot of people hear the word nirvana and they know the rock and roll band and Buddha attained nirvana, but what they don't know is that nirvana is the culmination of Buddha having spent, according to reincarnation theory in Buddhism, 400 lifetimes perfecting 6 levels of these rings of consciousness, of enlightenment. So when you go into a state of consciousness that extends all the way through the 9 planets, these are like giant belts or rings of awareness, which scientists are actually measuring today in the lab. Now, the idea that you can merge with those fields means that when you enter these fields, you become all-knowing. You get to know what the fields know, how, what they actually have recorded throughout history, what they know. You can know the truth about anything. And the fields just keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And Buddha says in what's known as the Lankavatara Sutra, a paramount sutra to Tibetan Buddhism, that you're not in nirvana until you cross the 7th, and the 7th is the only permanent realization. All the other states beneath it, a practitioner will go in the state and get very, very incredibly high and knowledgeable and gain all this insight and wisdom, and then they'll go back to normal human suffering. But once you cross the seventh, you're permanently enlightened, and that is the idea of a truly enlightened master, someone who crosses the seventh. I had an experience after 7 years of meditating every day. This was in 1986 at around Christmas time, where I was taken through all seven, but I didn't cross the seventh. I only came to the border of it. And these states are spectacular. I mean, it's unimaginable. We think of, space exploration and science and the idea of, all the conspiracies on the planet that are trying to create, like your films, mind control.
Right.
And the only ultimate freedom is to free your mind. Like in the movie The Matrix, the only real thing you can do is free your mind. And the question is, how do you do it?
Right.
How does consciousness become a victim of what I call the polarity matrix field?
Mm-hmm.
And how does it attain true liberation? That's what the movie The Voice is about. We interview scientists, experts, people of all walks of life who are, experiencing mystical states of consciousness, practicing different types of meditation, or sometimes just spontaneously these experiences occur to them, from small children to, people of all different walks of life, and we kind of, merge science and what theory in different religion tells us about these experiences, and of course, ultimately, how anybody can start to have these experiences. And when you consider the number of people that are suffering from depression, severe depression today, literally in the hundreds of millions worldwide,
right,
1 million suicides per year worldwide, we know that people, the economy and the way the world governments are designing global economies are making it harder and harder to own a home anywhere on the planet.
right.
I know from my brother who lives in Sweden, the taxes are so high in Europe.
Yeah.
And even though some of the real estate is cheaper, the taxes are way higher. And here, our homes are all like $1 million, $2 million in our major cities, and they become untouchable.
Yeah.
And so, how do you find enlightenment? How do you find freedom? And in my studies, in extraterrestrial life, and the films I've made on UFOs, from Evidence the Case for NASA UFOs to Dan Aykroyd Unplugged on UFOs, and to my 4-hour miniseries From Here to Andromeda, to me the UFO represents freedom of movement. The idea that if you can possess this technology, you can go anywhere you want in the universe, find your own planet, and not be forced to pay enormous taxes. And the idea that a piece of land has to cost so much money, just this little piece of dirt, you owe your life just to live on it.
Sure.
You got to work your ass off day and night just to stay on this little piece of dirt.
So is David, is this what it's about, so to speak? In regards to attaining higher consciousness, could this also be because with higher consciousness you can actually develop new technology? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I really believe that. Yeah, I believe the Einsteins, the Teslas, many of the greatest scientists of our time experience these expanded states of consciousness. One of the things we explore in The Voice are a lot of Einstein's great sayings, but also the one thing in physics that mystified him more than anything was spooky action at a distance.
Right.
He experienced that living things like a mother and a baby rabbit are separated by hundreds or thousands of miles, and you hook them up to EEGs and electroencephalograms, and their brain waves are being measured, and you pinprick the baby rabbit, and the mother responds instantaneously, not at the speed of light, which would be talking on our cell phones, because microwaves are traveling at the speed of light, but instantly, faster than the speed of light. And then a French physicist named Alain Aspect separated an electron-anti-electron pair, known as the positron, separated them by thousands of miles. I don't even know how they did this, but when they stimulate the wave properties of one, the